Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. You're listening to a new Redefining Security podcast. Have you ever thought that we are selling cybersecurity insincerely, buying it indiscriminately, and deploying it ineffectively? Perhaps we are. So let's look at how we can organize a successful InfoSec program that integrates people, process, technology, and culture to drive growth and protect business value. Knowledge is power, now more than ever. Asgardia by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardia by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes. Pantera, the leader in automation security validation, allows organizations to continuously test the integrity of all cybersecurity layers by emulating real-world attacks at scale to pinpoint the exploitable vulnerabilities and prioritize remediation towards business impact. Learn more at pantera.io.
Hello, everyone. This is Sean Martin, and you're very welcome to a new Redefining Cybersecurity podcast here on ITSPmagazine. And as many know, this show is all about operationalizing security, actually getting beneath the marketing spin and the MTTX measurements and figuring out what it is we're really trying to do with security in business. And today I'm thrilled to have Javvad Malik on. Javvad, how are you?
I'm very good. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again. And I'm blessed and honored to have my co-founder, Marco, join me for this episode. Marco?
Well, I'm happy to be here. I mean, as soon as you told me, hey, Javvad is on, I'm like, all right, that sounds like a good time. So not only to educate our audience, but to get to say hello. And it's been a long time. So hi, Javvad.
Hi, Marco. It has been a long time. So
Yes.
I thank you both for taking time out to have a chat with me.
Of course.
I hate to even think back that it was probably 3 summers ago in Europe.
Something like that.
I know. It's sad. Hopefully someday soon we'll get to connect in person again. Perhaps InfoSec Europe this coming year, 2023, could be the magic moment. We'll see.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
In the meantime, security doesn't pause while we figure out our travel plans. Right? Teams are still working, hopefully, and certainly the cyber criminals are, and businesses still trying to run and protect the revenue that they generate. And we're going to talk about that in the context of culture and awareness and training and really bringing the human element. I often joke that there's a tech stack and a human stack. Marco laughs at that. So operationalizing the human stack in the business of security. And Javvad, so before we get into the nuts and bolts there, for those who may not know you, I mean, you're very well known in the industry. But for new listeners joining us, a few words about who you are, what you're up to, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, I like most people, I find really awkward introducing myself, but I also get quite surprised when I introduce myself and I think, wow, I've been working in the industry my entire career. It's like been 23 years. My hair's gone, it started off black and now it's all half gray, more than half gray. So yeah, I worked in where it was IT security. So I worked as a practitioner, I worked as a consultant, I worked as an industry analyst. So I've seen, I like to say, I've seen several sides of the industry. Nowadays, I work on the vendor side of the world. I work for KnowBe4, where I'm just like a security awareness advocate. But yeah, so I like to say that I was hands-on and technical enough at one point to be dangerous, and now I just rely on old war stories a lot in that regard. But the consulting and being an analyst was great. Being an industry analyst, I worked at 451 Research, and that was like probably one of my favorite jobs intellectually, because I spent all day just speaking to people far, far smarter than me. So company founders and investors and all that kind of jazz. So I've got a really good appreciation of how the industry works. So anyway, I've been around for a long time, and I like to blog and make videos and all that kind of stuff, and be on social media when I'm not working.
And do fun videos and stuff. Now, it's the one role that I haven't held, perhaps, the analyst role that I'm always intrigued by. And I feel I do some analyst type work. But the reason I'm starting with that is I want to pick a little bit on that to get your first perspective on kind of where things sit with respect to the culture of security within an organization. To your point, you spoke to a lot of executives and leaders and investors and vendors, and I'm sure the whole mix. How have things progressed over the years? I know awareness in general is up, but are we doing what we need to with respect to awareness over the years?
Oh, this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? So on many fronts, we are way ahead of where we were like 10, 15 years ago. Companies are no longer doing that. Most companies are not doing, should I say, that once a year, get everyone in a room, feed them coffee and donuts, and force feed them like this is what the policy is, and basically read through the whole policy and then expect them to go out and be security experts. So we've moved away from that, and the investment into that awareness side from VCs, and then you've got tons of startups in this space as well, everyone trying to tackle it from a different angle. Some people use simulated phishing, others people try to get more behavioral analytics out of your existing systems, others have like some really funny or engaging videos, and so there's lots of different types of content out there, and they all have their place. I think what has driven this, like most things in security, the initial push has been through a compliance angle. So let's get an LMS in place, a learning management system, so that we can give someone some content, give them some questions at the end of it, and therefore the regulator will be happy that we've ticked that box, like everyone's a security expert now. So I think that's kind of like where the industry came to, which is still, like I said, a far better place than what we were like 10, 15 years ago. But then broadly speaking, it kind of, I wouldn't say stagnated, but I think there's a few missteps that have been made along the way. And a lot of that has been really how security teams have treated their colleagues within the organization. So forcing them to go through these modules, even if they're 100%, accurate and they're correct, they might not be relevant, or they might not be timely, or these things interrupt people's workflow. So what we see is this kind of like, subtle pushback, or in some cases very vocal pushbacks. We've all seen those headlines where a company has made massive layoffs, and then they get a phishing email, simulated phishing email from their IT team saying, hey, you've just been given a bonus. And then they click on it and they say, haha, suckers, take this training. So in that regard, I think we're taking some steps backwards. Just because we have these tools at our disposal doesn't mean we need to use them in this manner. And I think that's where the industry needs to sort of like shift some of its attention.
So I want to get philosophical right away, because I know you're kind of already going there, right? So thank you, Doug, for this.
They have thoughts.
Yeah, she doesn't agree with me. So sometimes I think people still think that cybersecurity is a product, and I think it's a culture that use certain product to change that culture, that behavior, that mindset. At least this is what I'm figuring out in all this conversation that we're doing. And you're kind of going there. Like, so am I correct in thinking that way? Should we stop thinking of cybersecurity as a product that is going to resolve your problem?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think if we think of it as a product, that's like thinking, it's like January's around the corner. It's like everyone taking out a gym membership in January, thinking that's what's going to get me fit. The gym is not going to get you fit. It's your mindset. It's how you approach life. It's how you approach your diet. Really, if you want to get fit, all you need is a skipping rope. All you need is a pair of trainers and go for a run every morning. That's all you need. So you don't need a state-of-the-art gym. You don't need to buy like one of those home racks and and I've gone through all of that in my life. I thought maybe if I buy this kit, maybe if I get this, then I'll have my six-pack abs. And it's not. It's really a mindset change, and you don't even need to go militant. I'm not saying like start measuring your food and everything. You just need to just make a few sensible choices. Cut out the soda, cut out the processed food, and the weight will come off and what have you. Anyway, that I've stretched that analogy probably a bit too far, but I think security is the same way. We need to think of it as a mindset and as something that we embed within it, and not rely on a product or a certain control alone. Because we've seen examples like, perfect example, MFA is a brilliant control. It's probably one of the best technical controls we can offer that is visible to an end user. It can protect their account. But we've seen, like with MFA fatigue attacks, even they can be compromised because the user's getting all these prompts and they get fed up. And then someone calls them up and say, hello, I'm from your IT team and there's a problem with authentication. Just click approve and those problems will go away. And they're like, thank you. Okay, my problems are now solved. And, that's really where the problems are all beginning. So, just relying on a certain product or a tool or if I buy this thing, whether it be, consultancy from a big four, or something, that's not going to solve your problems. The change has to come from within.
So I'm going to stick with and I don't know if it needs to be the gym, but I'll take any hobby, because I have many hobbies and the receipts to prove that I have them. Because when I get interested in something, I want to be in it. So if I'm gonna play some tennis, I'm gonna get a nice racket and some good balls and the right gear and good shoes and maybe a nice bag to haul all that stuff with, that I feel like I'm ready to do that hobby, that sport.
And then you miss the ball.
And then I miss the ball and I look stupid anyway. But Mike is still on this kind of the philosophical, and I know we wanted to talk about, I think you call it the branding of the security team, but I'm just wondering, just it is the mindset. And you talked about measuring the calories and things like that. I'm just wondering, keeping with that analogy, how do we as a security team actually feel good about what we're doing? I think there is a place for technologies and tools to help us feel good and to demonstrate that we can do things, not superfluously. I mean, I don't want to waste money, but if I feel good about doing what I'm doing, maybe I will actually hit the ball sometime, right? So I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So there's this, if we stay on the philosophical angle, there's this misconception most people have, is that when I'm motivated to do something, I will do something. So if I wait to be motivated to hit the gym, then I'll have a good workout. Whereas really what studies have shown in behavioral psychology is that if you identify as a healthy person, as a fit person, you will then go and do the actions that will lead you to becoming a healthy person. So I think that validation or that self-image needs to be corrected first. And that will make you feel good, or that will give you the motivation. Feeling good won't give you the motivation to go ahead and do it. So I think there's something to your point. I'm not trying to completely dismiss it, but I think really it needs to be internal. Like, we need to think about what is our mission here. And like most jobs, the mission isn't to feel good, it's to be efficient in our jobs. Now, maybe the question is, how do we measure if we're good at our jobs? And that's a very valid thing, because I think security is quite difficult to measure consistently across all the different dimensions of security. But really, I think it comes down to that self-image. Are we reducing risk? I mean, ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. Okay, how do I go about? We are the department that is going to help reduce cyber risk. Okay, and then take it from there, and then invest or take those steps that fulfill that mission.
So, I mean, obviously we make fun of things because, of course, you need the tool. You need the motivation, and you need the knowledge, and you need the tools. Because I think that if someone is actually using it, the tool, even the psychological one, correctly for bad reason, is the cyber criminals. I mean, let's face it. I mean, they're still a step ahead, and I think they understood they're using technology, strictly technology. It's not going to get them anywhere. So it's more a human weakness that we're looking at here. So I know you've been doing some research in, what are the latest funny or scary, whatever you want to go with that, techniques that we're facing now, and maybe what is much different from what it was a few years ago.
Yeah, so there are so just if I just rewind slightly, just on the psychology point, just for the last thing, and with our internally, like the fear of the negative outweighs the fear of the positive, or the reward of the positive. So basically, like the football's on at the moment, the World Cup. You might be watching it, or soccer, as some of you might refer to it. If you have a penalty, if you're taking a penalty, statistically, you have more chance of scoring if you go straight down the middle, because the goalkeeper, before you shoot, has made up their mind whether they're going to dive to the left or the right, the high or the low. So statistically, most of them will dive to one of the sides as opposed to staying in the middle. So you've got more chance of shooting straight down the middle and scoring. But very few players will take that shot down the middle, because if they shoot down the middle and the goalkeeper saves it, the striker looks stupid. They look like, why did this idiot just shoot straight down the middle? But if they shoot to the corner and the goalkeeper saves it, everyone will say, well, the goalkeeper was very good. And this is, I think, that one of the fundamental problems we see a lot of security teams and CISOs have is, like, they might say for a long time, for the longest time before EDR came out, it was like, antivirus is useless. Okay, we agree. Remove it from your estate. Well, if we get popped,
you don't need the goalie.
Yeah, if we get popped and someone says they didn't even have antivirus, then I look stupid.
Wow, that's a really good metaphor. I love it. Given I'm now following, because with 2 years of no qualifying in Italy, I refuse to watch it, but that's a different story. No, I love that. So with that in mind, are we giving an advantage to the opposite team?
Yeah,
by having to play by the rules of looking like we're doing the right thing, we're checking the box, but no, we aren't really doing the right thing.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, are there cyber criminals that they know shooting down the middle, so they don't care if they look bad?
Yeah, no, they know exactly what to do. Exactly. So they will be very more likely to play the game, far more. And we see this happen in all sorts of industries. So the other example I love is that of Coca-Cola. For the last 100 years, they've been the dominant soft drink, seller in the world. Apart from a few geographies, no one's really taken significant market share from them. And why is that? Because everyone that goes to compete with Coke, they try to follow the Coke formula. Let's make a cola, let's sell it, let's try to make it a bit sweeter, let's try to sell it a bit cheaper, let's try to sell it in a bigger bottle. These are the things they go for. And there's nothing wrong with that, but all of them have failed in that approach. They haven't really made much headway. The one soft drink manufacturer that has taken the most market share from Coke in the last 50 years, it comes in a tiny can, it tastes absolutely vile, and it's far more expensive, which is Red Bull. So, again, I think if you're always following the same pattern, then Coke is going to be like, okay, here comes another competitor trying to do what we do. Okay, let's spend another 5 billion this year on advertising and drown them out. But when something very different came along, it caught them off guard. And there's lots of marketing techniques they use to maximize that. But I think the same thing happens in security. We just go for the same formula time and time again. If you can get any CISO and say, okay, how do you build a security team? They'll probably start with the same base layer. Okay, let's have some perimeter control, some endpoint, some dynamic or static like code testing. Let's have a SOC built with this many people in place. Let's do log management. Let's have these sort of, and all of that is right. That's perfect. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not saying these aren't tried and tested methods, but I'm saying if this is all you're relying on, the best practices, quote unquote, then you might be missing some techniques and tactics that could make you really an unattractive target to criminals, or increase the difficulty for criminals trying to get in and compromise you. And that's really what we're doing. I mean, how do we reduce the risk? It's like by making it more difficult for active criminals to actually break in. If we can force them to be more noisy in our network, if we can force them to, like, okay, an email alone won't work, I have to now phone someone else, or maybe I have to physically turn up to their building, it increases their risk. And they're going to be like, screw that, man, I'm going to just go hack someone else because they're a lot easier.
Yeah, and I know you started to give a few examples there. I want to bring it to reality, and I don't know if we want to dig into ransomware and some of those attributes or methods perhaps that are used for that, because we can talk analogies and use fabulous stories like we have, but at the end of the day, right, we're saddled with a bunch of technologies we deployed to generate business and generate revenue, and those are enabled by systems and fueled by data, and then we're responsible for the controls, physical, digital, and human, and otherwise, to ensure that whatever revenue is generated is protected. So how, just maybe using ransomware, if you have other ideas, how do we avoid the shoot down the middle scenarios? How do we look good by also doing good and not just looking good for the sake of looking good? What are some ideas there?
So because the analyst sort of like that still lives deep within somewhere, I think data is our friend if we know how to read it and interpret it. So there's two primary sources of data. We look at the external data that peers give, or surveys, or other organizations provide. So okay, how's ransomware getting into our organizations? That's one avenue. And the second sort of massive underutilized source of data is our internal incident logs. Basically, what's our top causes of incidents over the last couple of years? Go through that. It's not easy. It's not anything a tool can give you. You need to sit down and go through those incident reports and read them and say, okay, what was the root cause? How did they get in? How did they get in? And internally, that's something for every CISO to do internally themselves. But when you look at all the external reports, the top 3 attack vectors are phishing, or spear phishing more specifically, exploiting unpatched vulnerabilities on public systems, and the third is going after weak credentials, or like things like expose RDP with a weak password or what have you. So these
and do you know, does it matter whether it's on premises or in the cloud?
It doesn't really make that much of a difference. No. It's like these still remain the the patching sort of like goes down a bit in the cloud, especially if your cloud provider's updating that for you or whatever you, but your social engineering and your credential protection really remains the same level of risk. So I'd say if you can start with these, and these aren't sexy, but I'd say like this is, and you see, once you see this, you will start seeing every breach reported in this light. You'll say, it's right. It's like 60, 80, 90% of all breaches, they fall into one of these 3 broad categories. What really advances in terms of like, even when you look at state-sponsored attackers or what have you, it's not really the initial attack vector. It's really how they then disguise their movements once they're in your system. That's where the sophistication really goes. So if we can block off or make it really difficult for these criminals to initially infect your organization, I think that is like critical. So, and again, all of these, there's no one way you just clear it off. It's not like, oh, let's train our users and spear phishing will go away. No, invest in your mail gateway, invest in some detection controls on your endpoint, some behavioral heuristics, whatever. have an EDR there, so that even if someone does click on something, it can block it, all that kind of stuff. But focus on these, and I think that will be really, really good in driving your product selection strategy, and you will have a defined outcome associated with your choice. And one thing Wendy Nather used to say to me, she was my boss when I was at 451 Research. I was like, this is when I was new, and I was like, Wendy, I don't know what to write in this report. I think this, I think that, but how do you know when you're right? And she was like, no one really knows in this field what's right or wrong. She goes, but just write whatever you want as long as it is defensible. And I for the longest time, I had it on a Post-it note on my desk. I was like, is it defensible? ? And so I say that, ask that off a lot of like CISO friends and whatever you. I said, like, okay, you're doing this. What's the rationale? Is it defensible? And so I think if you take a data-driven approach like this, and you say, okay, these are the top attack vectors. This is how they get in with ransomware. Okay, let's implement some controls, some layers to lessen that risk. Okay, that's good. Then what do they do once they're in the organization? And we know for a lot of these gangs, they spend longer and longer within the network, trying to find out what's the juicy data, exfiltrating some data, what have you. Okay, so that means I need to look at this technology or this technology. Maybe I don't need a SIM. Maybe I just need to deploy some better honeypots, because that would be really effective. Like fewer alerts, but high quality alerts. Maybe that's what I need, as opposed to more alerts. Maybe that's not the answer. Maybe I need some exfiltration, like DLP type scenario in there, and what have you. And then the final stage is all your recovery. So if you are popped, like what is your technical recovery controls? What's your comms plan, and all that kind of good stuff. So we're still working within the layers, but now we're using the data to justify each one of our expenses, and we tie it down to a specific outcome that we're looking for. That way, even if like you are one of those CISOs that's only there for 18 months and then you're moved on, the next person that comes in, they can actually take a look at the strategy and they can say, well, okay, I understand why those decisions were made. It's not a political decision, it's based on data. And I think that's the way that we make forward, and we pass on the baton in a respectful manner to our peers.
I'm still going to scrap the program and start over.
Yeah, well,
So I think we kind of going in full circle here. We started with like, we can buy the better. It's a product. We buy the best product, like Sean, buying a Les Paul guitar to play it really good.
To practice once a year, yes.
What? Now I'm getting to the point that, the training, the practice. I mean, we again, we're making fun of things here, but we need both. So how is it training, on your opinion, evolving? And is it getting better? Is it getting more effective in light of maybe better tools? When you need to use both, right?
So yeah, so training overall is a lot better than where it was. The volume and the variety of material out there to help teach people is immense. And forget about paid stuff. You can go on YouTube or TikTok, and there's so much free content out there. So it's not a lack of information. I mean, as an industry, one of the problems we've had is we focus a lot on training and not enough on awareness. And that was compliance driven. Yeah, get it. But we need to move away from this, like, you should do this, that, yes and no's, because that will only get people thinking in a specific, okay, if this happens, then do this. Raising awareness or thinking more like a marketer will help people build a framework in their mind as to what to do. And that's really important. And there's a lot of that type of good, engaging content out there now as well, because it's a bit like teaching a kid how to cross the road. You don't take them to every single road and say, this is how you cross this road, this is how you cross this road. You just, whichever road you're at, you tell them, okay, we find the right place, stop, find the safe place, look, listen, when it's safe, then you cross. And if you build that framework of how to safely cross a road, they can then go to any road in the world pretty much, and they will know how to safely cross it.
Unless you go from the States to London.
Yeah. Well,
you have to look right.
We're pretty helpful over here, because on the floor there's little arrows that say look left or look right. Look right. So so that it anticipates that lots of foreigners from Europe or the US, they'll be there, and we're driving on the other side of the road, the correct side of the road, might I add, and
I heard that.
And therefore you can and that's really there's something really important about that as well, is that is training as well. That's an awareness. You're telling someone to look right because that's where the traffic's coming from, and it's knowledge that's given to you at the time that you need it the most. You're about to cross the road. That's the time where you tell someone to look in that direction. There's no point if you are on your flight over from New York to London, and midway through the air staff comes on and they say like, oh, by the way, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so when you're crossing, look to the right. The information is correct. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just given at the completely wrong time. It's not of no use to you then. And this
but may I add
in
one
New York,
thing?
you get the honk and the FU.
Yeah.
So you know
Okay,
you're about to
good.
cross.
Stay right there, because for me, the best lesson, and that's when it become awareness and a culture, like it becomes part of who you are and how you act, is, for example, even if you're on a one-way road, I would suggest to look on both sides, because there's going to be that idiot that is not respecting the thing. Maybe it's somebody on a bike, maybe anything else. And maybe somebody that is not from that country is the first time you get the car and he's on the wrong side of the road. So my point is understanding exactly why you do it, and not because you've told you to do like that. You know that the danger can come from both sides. And New York is a good example. I think I'll look 2-3 times both sides before I cross the street there. Or in Italy, if you want to tell me that.
No, absolutely, you're right, and this goes back to that building that framework of thinking within people's minds, isn't it? We want to say, okay, these are some of the risks. This is the proper way, but then there are idiots on the road, and you need to look out for them. And this is why, if you can build that, so there's no point in just teaching people this is how you spot a phishing email, because now phishing comes in how? It comes in on your text messages. It comes in on social media, on Twitter DMs, on Instagram, on Discord channels. Everywhere you look, it's a channel. Any connection point is a channel. It comes on WhatsApp messages. So there's no way you can train everyone on like every single channel out there. But you say, okay, here's some of the red flags. Here's how they will approach you. Here's some of the things to look out for. And if you're careful, then you won't fall victim to it. And I think that's the direction we need to go in more.
And does the tone matter? I know early on you gave the example of people being laid off, and then the phishing email comes with, by the way, you got a bonus because we have all this money now. Thanks for clicking this link. What are your thoughts on kind of tricking and teasing? And I gave the example of the horn and the honking, which can be very aggressive as an alert. But then the clip of the food delivery guy on the bike, Marco noted the bikes. They're not honking; they have their earbuds in, listening to the football match, and they're just going to swing by, and their handlebars are going to clip you. That's your signal. you're in the bike lane. So how much does context and tone matter, not just the timing?
Oh, I think context and tone is like half the battle here. And a lot of this, I think, comes back to really how the relationship of the security team is with the rest of the organization. So, and a good litmus test is just go into any department in your organization, say, hey, buddy, how's it going? Do you know who the security team are? And maybe they'll have a nickname for you. Maybe they call you the Department of No or something like that. Or if they're being polite, say, okay, are you aware of where the policy is? Or are you aware there's a policy? Yeah, we know there's a security policy. Do you know how to find it? Not really. It's somewhere on the intranet. I'm going to have to search for it. Do you know how to report an issue? I have no idea. Maybe I raise an IT ticket. I don't know. There's all these things, and like, how do they perceive you? Do they really want you in that room? And there's a survey done by a hotel chain, a customer satisfaction survey. And so it's rating of 1 to 5, between disappointed to extremely happy about how the room was, how the food was, how the cleanliness was, all those kinds of things. And they found that the answers were heavily influenced by the check-in time and process. So if they felt that they had a good check-in process, they scored everything else higher. And if they scored lower on that, they had to wait a long time, or there's a mix-up, then they scored everything else lower. And this is true when you look at security teams as well. Like, what is the first time someone in the organization interacts with the security team? It's either to bore them during induction week, or it's to slap them on the wrist to say you've done something wrong, to deny their request in a project, or to say, ha, we just caught you out, look how clever we are and look how dumb you are. So a lot of it comes down to that relationship and how you've built it. And I always say, like, before you send that first phishing email, let people know that you're going to do this and why you are going to do this. Because you have to understand, how do people feel once they fall for a phishing email? And it could be, and the template here becomes irrelevant. It could be a very benign, sort of very simple thing. But how do they feel? How do you make them feel? And if you make them feel like you've tricked them, then they're going to be unhappy with you. And whatever you say after that, whatever training you provide, they're not going to care, because they're going to be pissed off at you. But if they feel like it was an education, then they'll have a very different reaction.
How do you feel about gamification, like making it a game as you learn as you go, and it's kind of fun? Maybe there is a score going on. I mean, I think we had some conversation the other day about, the level of education you can achieve with video games and kids, but I think it does work for adult too. So any point on that?
Yeah, gamification is fantastic. And I know of several companies that used it even in phishing sort of thing. So October is traditionally known as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So someone I spoke to, they said, okay, here's a completely voluntary opt into this game. And what they do is they'll send you phishing emails throughout the month, and they progressively get harder and harder. And because people have opted in, they're just cool with it. It doesn't matter what the context is. And then at the end of the month, there's a score, and whoever scored the most gets a prize or what have you. There's another company I know of. What they did is they pitted departments against each other. And what they did, so say it was finance versus HR, they would say to finance, okay, here are 3 phishing templates. Which one do you vote that we send to HR?
Oh, cool. I like it.
And then they've done the same for HR to finance. So that way they're picking their weapon of choice, they're sending it. So and then everyone's cool with it, because it's not the bad security team trying to trick them, it's their colleagues tricking them as part of a game. So it's a bit like Battleship. So then it becomes a lot more enjoyable.
And also allows you, in this case, to see things from the other perspective, like where you are kind of the attacker. And yeah, I feel like that's very, very important to kind of get in the other team shoes. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I love this, and I'm glad you went there, because it's where I wanted to take us as we kind of wrap. And it's a view for the future, and my thoughts were along this line that different departments probably have different views and different ways of thinking, just like we look at engineers, developers versus QA even think differently. Audit thinks differently than compliance. So my question is the future of security training, security awareness, security culture. Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, so I love the point you just made. I think, everyone's guilty of this. Like, you take any problem to an engineer, they will reframe it as an engineering problem and give you an engineering solution. And this is what we do with security. We can take any risk, cyber risk, and we will reframe it in our own terms and then provide the solution like that. And I think what we need to do is get more people involved in that process. And I'm not saying we set up a program and take hours and hours of people's time a year or what have you. But really, we just need to get people involved in the process of, like, sometimes phishing is like, hey, do you want to select the phishing template that we send out? That's a good way to get people involved. Or what? Here are some training modules. Which ones should be good? Or, this is the outcome we're trying to achieve. We want people to lock their workstations when they leave. Okay, now what do? We think, okay, let's decrease the lockout time. So 5 minutes of inactivity, the screen automatically locks. Okay, no, maybe how about we ask them and say, well, what do you want? And they're like, you know what, I can never remember the functions. So give me some 3 stickers I can put on my keyboard that reminds me that I just have to hit these keys when I walk off. Or set me up a hotspot in the corner. So I drag my mouse into. So oftentimes we try to solutionize before we actually understand what's the root cause of something happening. So I think that getting different people together is and getting their viewpoints is really the key to making that, because value itself is a very ambiguous term, and I often say, like, sometimes there's this hero complex that we have in security, that we have to go out and save everyone from themselves or save the organization. Without us, they'd all go bankrupt. But if you imagine you go to a restaurant, and I tell you it's a restaurant that there's a Michelin star chef in the kitchen and the food is just perfect, but you turn up and the tables are dirty, there's flies, and the place smells of sewage, you're not going to sit there. So by that terms, the cleaner and the waiter are adding as much value to that business as that Michelin star chef is. And this is what I think we need to think about in security, that our colleagues in any department, in sales, in marketing, in finance, in HR, they are adding just as much security to the organization as we are. And we need to recognize that and give them the right tools in a way that is useful for them. And that's how we move the needle. Everyone talks about zero trust. Let's start talking about zero friction. Let's talk about making their lives easier. So having the tools or the knowledge or the learning in place that doesn't really impact their job, but helps them make better risk decisions.
Boy, I have like 10 more questions in my head, and it is my show. I could ask one more. We talked before we started about kind of changing the way business works. So rather than just plugging the holes, closing the gaps, do you find the work you're doing in awareness and training and culture building and defining that organizations are able to say, okay, we have a really bad process or some really faulty logic, or this workflow just breaks down here all the time. So rather than continuing to press on the human to say, no, you really should, no, you really shouldn't, that the company actually addresses the core issue as a way to solve the problem.
Yeah, so that happens sometimes. And what it is sometimes it's really difficult for, even as individuals, forget about companies, but as individuals, ego comes into it, and it's really hard to admit when you've made a mistake and changing it from that perspective. But what I find easier is you just help them ask the right questions, because we live in a world of assumptions. We think, how many times have we seen, like, oh, companies, their patching is rubbish because they're lazy, or because they don't have an asset inventory, or because of this, or it's really easy to sit on the sidelines and make assumptions, and therefore then leading to a faulty chain of logic that leads us to, oh, so now we need to do X. If they just had 5 more analysts in their SOC, then they could have seen this, or what have you. And sometimes it's about understanding what the pain point actually is that helps. So I mean, I spoke to I spoke to a customer of they had Canary, those Canary tools by Thinkst. I don't know, they're those little honeypot devices. And he said that he was a director of security at a company, and he said he installed them, and literally they only go off when someone is scanning or unauthorized or what have you. And he said it completely shifted how he thought about log management and alerts and what have you. He goes, like, I've got a SIM on one hand that is generating me 1,000 events a day, whatever. And he goes, then I've got this little box that only tweets at me once a year, but I run to this tweet and that's all buried in the noise. So, it's about, I think what you said in the beginning, it's about what's the outcome we're trying to achieve. Are we trying to collect 1 million logs a day? Well, no, that's not our outcome. Our objective is, like, how we're going to find bad behavior and how we're going to, stop it. And the Eurostar, the train that connects the UK to the mainland of Europe, and it goes. They a few years ago they spent about £6 billion to improve the efficiency of the train. So, and it cut the journey time between London and Paris by 40 minutes. So that's an awful lot of money to reduce the journey time from, I think it was like 2 hours 40 to 2 hours or something. They cut the journey time down.
And they let less revenue on booze because it's one less drink.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You see, now the thing is, like, when you actually break it down, the journey time itself is the least painful part of your commute. It's the what's more painful is getting to the airport or to the check-in terminal, going through security, getting searched, waiting to board, finding your seat. If you want to improve the experience, improve those parts first. Don't spend $6 billion on shaving a few minutes off the journey time, which once you're sat there, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. In fact, if you wanted to spend that $6 billion better, you could have offered free booze to everyone, served by a top-class model. And in a year, you'd still know where, in 10 years, you'd probably, that would, like 5 years out, that money would last you. And people would actually ask for the trains to be slowed down as opposed to sped up, I suppose.
Sorry, Javvad, I already have a job. I can't be serving booze on the Eurostar. Well, I could chat with you for hours. It's been way too long since we had a chance to talk and catch up. And I love the work you do, and in every facet of your role in the community, and appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us and helping those listening operationalize security culture in the business. It's an important element, and I'm thrilled Marco was on to bring it philosophical as well.
Oh yeah, no, I had a good time, and I always this was more about the humans than
the human stack.
And I'm a big fan of InfoSec, and cybersecurity is about the humans. So
it is.
You got me on that one.
We touched all humans in this one, the practitioners and the employees. So
yeah, and of course, great to see you, Javvad. At least virtually. And, hopefully next time we'll be in person.
Thank you so much. No, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And for those listening, appreciate you joining us. And we'll ask Javvad to share any links to articles, research, blogs he's written, books he's published, whatever helps you get your head wrapped around this conversation and take some next steps to operationalize cybersecurity. And thanks everybody for joining us. Stay tuned for more Redefining Cybersecurity here on ITSPmagazine.
Pantera, the leader in automation security validation, allows organizations to continuously test the integrity of all cybersecurity layers by emulating real-world attacks at scale to pinpoint the exploitable vulnerabilities and prioritize remediation towards business impact. Learn more at pantera.io. Asgardia by WSO2 is a developer-focused identity and access management solution. Offered as Identity as a Service, or IDaaS, Asgardia by WSO2 creates seamless login experiences to your apps in minutes. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Redefining Security podcast. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share ITSPmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.